But the bottom line is there's not enough shelter for everyone who needs it, and our shelter is full all the time. The entire network of shelters is full all the time, as you know. And we have people sitting in our shelter today who have everything they need to go live independently. They've gotten their medical things in order, their mental health things in order. They have a voucher to go live in somewhere, and there is not a place to put them. There is no home for them to go to. And I know affordable housing is something you're very passionate about, and that's, one of the reasons we see people on the street is because we can't free our shelter beds because there's nowhere for those people to go.
Welcome to America's Healthiest City. I'm your host, Will Melton, and today I bring you Emily Millheiser, the Director of Community and Donor Engagement of CARITAS here in Richmond. This is going to be a really wonderful conversation. Emily and I go back to 2020 when we went through the Leadership Metro Richmond Quest class together, so we know each other pretty well, and we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to get right into it. But before I do, I just want to remind you that if you have not yet visited americashealthiestcity.com, that is the place to go to check out the ideas board, submit your ideas, leave your comments, and see what it means to become an ambassador. It doesn't cost you anything, but if you do represent a business, a nonprofit, a government agency, or an academic institution, and you want to make Richmond the healthiest community in America in 10 years, please sign on to americashealthiestcity.com. This is ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Radio Network. Emily, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited to have this conversation because I know a lot of people, and I don't know a lot of people as well as I know you, and so I'm excited to dive in. And I think the thing that I'm really most excited about is your individual impact in the community, and we're going to cover a lot of things. But I do want to talk about CARITAS, and I want to talk about Leadership Metro Richmond, so we're going to try to pack it all in. But I want to start out by giving you a chance to just introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers, and just give a little bit of your background, if you would.
Sure. So I grew up here in Richmond in what is now the near west end of Henrico, pre-Short Pump days, and did not expect to live in Richmond as an adult. I actually thought I hated Richmond when I was growing up, and I left Richmond for 6 years to go to William & Mary in Auburn for school. And while I was in school, I would come home and I started spending time in the city, and I realized that I didn't hate Richmond, I hated suburbs. And so I moved back here in 2002 and have been here ever since, and it's been an amazing time to be in Richmond. So I went to Auburn to get a degree in marriage and family therapy, of all things, to be a marriage counselor, and worked in the mental health field for nearly a decade. Got pretty frustrated and burnt out, just seeing all the things that were stacked against the people we were trying to help in the mental health system. And I thought, gosh, I need to find a different way to help. And during that time, when I was in college, I was a first-generation student, and I was a member of a sorority, and that was a really important network to help educate me about everything else outside of the classroom that was going to help me get my life.
What sorority was it?
Gamma Phi Beta. And so I was a volunteer for my sorority all through my 20s. I was advising other college women, loved being on campuses, loved working with students. And so I transitioned over into the higher ed space and worked for a statewide nonprofit that was raising money for scholarships and supporting student support programs, doing a lot of collaborative efforts around sustainability and supporting first-gen students and minority students and things that I was passionate about. From there, I went to work for the national headquarters of Sig Up Fraternity, which is headquartered in Richmond, on their foundation side, also raising money for scholarships, student support, and all the things I was passionate about. And then in 2019, I got the opportunity to go do that work at CARITAS, and it was just the right moment in my life to really bring my work and efforts back to the Richmond community.
That is, I think one of the things that impresses me about you is that you are a connector, and you have that history with your sorority, and that was something that was important to you, obviously important enough to volunteer throughout your 20s. Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. For those of you who don't know, I actually went to VCU for a semester, and I said, this is not for me, I'm getting out of here. So I don't know. I actually was going to join a fraternity. I kind of went and checked it out and just decided that college wasn't for me, so it wasn't a second thought there. But for folks who maybe haven't been in a sorority, can you talk a little bit about what the benefit is there and kind of how that has shaped your life?
Yeah, I will say first of all that having been a long-time sorority volunteer, things look really different on different campuses, right? But I was very fortunate at William & Mary that I walked into a house that was full of diverse women from all different types of backgrounds, and my experience was really those women being there as a support that my family was not able to be to me because I was a first-generation student, and helping me understand what does it look like to apply to grad school, what does it look like to go interview at another campus, things like that. And then as an alumna, when I was volunteering, that built a lot of leadership skills to be able to stand up in front of a 300-person chapter and present to them. It was nearly 30 years ago, I'm telling on myself, but I've been a member of my sorority for nearly 30 years, and I am still in touch with that network, and a bunch of my friends are going on a trip together in a couple weeks. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for that insight, because I wouldn't know. My wife actually was part of a sorority, and she went to college at Bucknell, which is in the middle of nowhere, and she decided to jump into that for the support network, and I think it does serve that purpose. So I want to skip over CARITAS and come back to it, because I want to talk about something. You're quite the influential person here in Richmond as a member of the Grant Selection Committee for Impact 100. Talking about scholarship fundraising, you guys just gave a lot of money to VFCCE, which is a group that raises money for scholarships for community college students who have been in the foster care system.
Mm-hmm.
And I point that out because our last guest, Will Keck, actually was in the foster care system. It's something we talked about on our show, so if you haven't seen episode 14, please check it out on YouTube. But let's talk about Impact 100. You guys are doing great work. We'll also talk about some of the organizations that Impact 100 is given to, if you can cover that.
Sure. So Impact 100 is a collective women's giving circle. The idea, it started as if 100 women could give $1,000 and pool together $100,000, what could they do with that grant? And we've evolved over the last 14 years. And yes, the last organization that we gave to was the Community College Foundation. And they have a lot of different programs there to support community college students, but the particular program that they brought to us for funding was one supporting folks who have come out of foster care. Interestingly, through the years of reviewing grants for Impact 100, I have learned a lot specifically about the foster care system, and there are a lot of great nonprofits in Richmond try to support folks who are coming out of the foster care system, because once you age out of foster care, you're on your own in a lot of cases, and it's very tough. So this organization has a program specifically for people who are coming out of the foster care system, and that is what we gave them $100,000 to support. We support a wide variety of programs around the Richmond area. So CARITAS has actually benefited from impact funding, Child Savers, Connexus, Shalom Farms, Urban Hope, Sacred Heart Center. There's a wide variety of Richmond nonprofits, and we've actually been able to invest $2 million into, I believe, 36 different Richmond nonprofits over the last 14 years.
That's fantastic. I want to give a shout out to Brooke Purcell. She is one of the members of Impact 100, and I saw her photo in the check that you guys gave to the Community College Foundation.
Yes.
So. You're listening to America's Healthiest City on Mike King Biz Radio Network on ESPN Richmond 106.1 and Choice 105.3. I'm here today with Emily Millheiser from CARITAS, and we're going to dive right into that because we just talked about the money that Impact 100 gave to CARITAS. I think that was 2017, and that money went to a healing place for women. So can you talk about that program first, and then we'll talk about the rest of the programs that CARITAS offers?
Sure. So the Healing Place is a long-term residential recovery program. It is absolutely free to everyone who participates in that program, because we get tremendous support and funding from not only the community, but a little bit of government money, really funding from all over the place. Also, the people who are in that program actually help to support it. So they're working the security desk, they're working in the kitchen, they're on laundry duty. A lot of things that we would have to pay staff to do, the women in the program are actually doing. So that program has existed in Richmond for men since 2005, and it was always our dream to open a women's program as well. And when CARITAS opened the CARITAS Center at the end of 2020, we were able to open a women's program as well. So as part of that campaign, we recognize that a lot of women in our program have families and have children that they are separated from while they are in our program. And so Impact 100 specifically funded a family visitation suite for the women, not only in the healing place, but also who live in our recovery apartments to be able to have visitation time with their children.
So I'll tell a quick story here because I actually ran into somebody who was a resident of the healing place and had moved to Richmond from Michigan, of all places, because of the healing place. And I happened to be on Broad Street walking to my car, and I bumped into this young man who essentially was desperate to get to the healing place because his cutoff time was happening, and he had recently encountered some kind of medical emergency, some kind of crime or something, and he had been interviewed by the police, and he missed the bus and he couldn't get there. But he was really like stressed out and anxious, and I said, let's go. I can get you there in time. And we got him there with about 2 minutes, and he talked to the police officer on the phone while we were on the way there, and he got in. But he was very adamant that he was not going to miss his chance to stay in this program.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I learned something about the program through that. I really did think that was a profound moment for me, and certainly good to be able to help people. But there's a whole conversation around transportation that we can talk about in another. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. But let's talk about shelter. Talk about furniture bank, recovery, workforce. You've got a lot of stuff going on over there. You touch a lot of lives, and you've got to collaborate with other organizations in a number of ways. So why don't you hit the highlights there?
Yeah, so let me try to be as succinct as possible. Back in the 80s, when homelessness really became a problem all over the U.S. and specifically in Richmond, a lot of congregations looked out the window and said, gosh, we got to do something about this. This is terrible. And CARITAS came to be the organizing body that coordinated weeks at a time of shelter in those various congregations. So that's how we started. And for about the first 30 years, our emergency shelter traveled around to these various churches every week. We learned a lot over that time. One of the most important things we learned is that a lot of times people get out of our shelter, they get into some sort of housing situation, and they spend literally every dollar in their wallet to get a roof over their head and feed their kids if they have kids. And so we would go back and follow up with people, and they would be sitting in their empty apartment without a bed, without a dining room table, with absolutely nothing except a roof over their head. And so that is why we have Furniture Bank. We serve about 700 families a year currently, and every single item in our warehouse has either been donated or built by the community. So it's a really amazing program that helps a lot of folks. On the recovery side of things, I mentioned that the Healing Place for Men has been here since 2005. That was a program that had existed in other cities that was brought to Richmond. And it is a tough program. People come and live with us for 9 to 12 months of their life. But 80% of the people who walk into that program have experienced homelessness at some point. I mean, they are typically in a very bad spot, and it is more attractive to come be with us than to keep going. So they're there, and when they come out of that program, we have a workforce development boot camp that's 6 weeks long that helps them learn how to dress, how to write a resume, how to interview, how to manage their time, how to budget their money, all those important life skills to help them be successful. And then when we opened the CARITAS Center, we were able to open 47 sober living apartments. So we have nearly 100 people living in our recovery residences with other people in recovery.
That's awesome. So you said something about resume writing assistance. I saw that you used to help people with their resumes in the past as well. So I saw your accolades for great writing, and is that something that you still get to play around with? Maybe not for resumes.
No, I would say Impact 100 takes all my non-CARITAS time these days. I'm actually the chair of that organization now, but that was my transition job as I was leaving mental health and going into the nonprofit space. I paid my bills by writing resumes for folks.
That's awesome. So. Anything else on CARITAS that you really want our listeners to know about? Because I do want to talk a little bit about LMR and that being sort of the place that birthed the idea of America's Healthiest City, and then I want to go into Richmond specific as well.
Okay. Well, the one thing I would say is there's a lot of discussion about shelter right now in the city of Richmond, and we are certainly at the table in those discussions. But the bottom line is there's not enough shelter for everyone who needs it, and our shelter is full all the time. The entire network of shelters is full all the time, as you know. And we have people sitting in our shelter today who have everything they need to go live independently. They've gotten their medical things in order, their mental health things in order. They have a voucher to go live in somewhere, and there is not a place to put them. There is no home for them to go to. And I know affordable housing is something you're very passionate about, and that's one of the reasons we see people on the street is because we can't free our shelter beds because there's nowhere for those people to go.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, and I will be on a podcast later today to talk about that exact thing. So let's talk about LMR now, because again, that is the place where this thing was birthed, maybe about a year and a half after we graduated in 2020, best class ever, as we know. So we were in the same immersion group. We went into food. What we called food deserts, but we retermed it in our class to be food equity because it's about more than access and affordability. Why don't you tell me about why you applied to go into the the Quest Leadership Program, and maybe a little bit about what your overall experience was?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned that in 2019, I just really felt this calling in my life personally to, okay, you have these skills, you have these abilities, it's time to turn your attention to Richmond. And so I did that with my job change over to CARITAS, and I happened to start the LMR program within about 10 days of starting to work at CARITAS. So all of that just came together at the same time, and I was really able to build those networks together to just work more effectively.
So for those of you who don't know what Leadership Metro Richmond Quest is, it's a 9-month leadership program, and there's about 70 people from diverse backgrounds in fields of study and work that come together and learn about Richmond and study immersion topics. So you get a group of 10 folks. So we were, again, in the same topic of food equity, and I think that one of the things that is really important for folks to know, and I'm going to highlight this because I'm a sustainer of Leadership Metro Richmond, and I've been super involved working on reimagining the program for the next 10 years. And the network is the thing that I think is most important for people to know about. If you don't know, there's about 2,000 people in the network, and I'm going to kind of let you talk about that because you have been able to build several networks at the same time. What does that network mean to you? How have you been able to leverage that network for your own professional endeavors?
Yeah, I think, so we have been on a huge hiring spree at CARITAS, and we just hired someone who was in the current Leadership Quest class of LMR, and I was part of her interview process. I was showing her around the CARITAS facility, and somehow LMR came up, and she said, yeah, I'm doing LMR right now, and it's so great. And I was like, oh yeah, I did LMR a couple years ago, and she's like, man, it's a cult. She's like, it's a positive cult. And I was like, yeah, I agree with that, because everyone who goes through LMR and takes that time and that investment of money and the commitment to it is there because they want to provide something more. They want to be of more service, right? And you're there to learn, you're there to make connections, you're there to learn personally from people. I think so many of us who went through LMR have amazing personal stories, and it really is someone you could have not spoken to for 3 years and pick up the phone and say, hey, this person just applied for a job with me, tell me what you think. And it has been an incredible opportunity to meet people that my path did not cross with otherwise.
Thank you for listening to America's Healthiest City on Mike King Biz Radio Network. So we're in the studio today with Emily Millheiser. She's the Director of Community and Donor Engagement at CARITAS here in Richmond, and we're talking about LMR, Leadership Metro Richmond, and the powerful network and the positive cult that group is. I think I might have lost my question on LMR specifically here, but actually I wanted to give another shout out to Brooke Purcell, because I was looking for a business coach a couple of years ago, and I went on LinkedIn and I just typed in business coach, and I found her profile and I looked through, and it didn't say anything in her profile about LMR, but based on the experience that she had mapped out in her history, I said, I bet you anything she's gone through the program. So I went into the directory for Leadership Metro Richmond and I searched her name, and sure enough, she had gone through the program. I think it was, actually, I can't remember the year, 2017 or 19, but it's, you can identify people based on their behavior, how they show up in the world, and you can also validate whether people are honest, serious, legitimate leaders in the community through that network as well. Any other thoughts that you have that you would want to share with people about what LMR experience meant for you aside from the network and the education?
Yeah, I think that, being a native Richmonder, I learned so much about Richmond that I had never learned in school or any other way in life through LMR in my 40s. And I think that's the other thing that LMR brings to the table is it's not only a network of people who care, who are doers, but there's a base of understanding because we've all been provided the same information about how we got to where we are today. So we're all working from a similar understanding of where we are.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Richmond specifically because this is America's Healthiest City. Richmond is not yet America's Healthiest City, but we are on a 10-year quest to make it that, and this show is called America's Healthiest City. So I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I saw that you are on a quest to make Richmond the strongest community, or to make RVA stronger. And I'm on a quest to make RVA healthier, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about what does a strong RVA mean for you, and why is a healthy community something that people should invest in?
Yeah, so, Richmond is growing very rapidly, and that is because Richmond is awesome, right? Like, it's a beautiful city. There's so many recreational opportunities. There's so many arts opportunities. There's so many smart, just great people here. And to me, my vision of Richmond being the best it can be is that opportunity is truly available to as many people as possible. And so on the flip side of Richmond growing rapidly, our housing prices are going up very fast, and it's really hard to focus on your health when you don't know where you're going to sleep next month. So that ties very closely into my passion for CARITAS and affordable housing, and then the people who are under our roof, we actually do a lot to try to guide them towards a healthier lifestyle. We've got a fitness facility at CARITAS. We have a 10K running team for the Healing Place, and just trying to instill some positive habits there where there were negative ones before.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe some purpose there too. I love that your residents are active while they're there and working. I think that's a really tremendous thing. I think just workforce development in general. I mean, we are in a world where there is a skills gap, and that gap is widening, and we're dealing with AI and lots of things. So we need lots of people out there focused on those who are living on the margins.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, so before we go, I want to ask you a couple of things. One, what is it that you need right now? Is there anything that you want to put a call out there for the community that you need help with?
So I would say for CARITAS specifically, we serve 800 meals a day to the folks who live under our roof, so we always appreciate meal donations and anybody bringing us food. Next week, we are starting a renovation of our men's campus, and our men are going to be walking back and forth between buildings for a few months. So if anybody has a connection to 125 rain ponchos, hit me up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. And as folks are out there looking to get connected to you and CARITAS and Impact 100, can you kind of plug them into where they might find information about those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is hopefully easy to find on the web. CARITAS is CARITAS for Virginia.org. Impact 100 is impact100rva.org. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn and various other places, so always happy to talk to anyone and try to point them in the right direction.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much for coming on the air with us today. This was a wonderful interview. I can't wait to share this with our audience.
Thanks for having me.
All right, this was America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Radio Network. Thanks for joining me today. Please visit americashealthiestcity.com to get involved.